Okay, well, thank you for joining me. I'm going to be doing a live demo of our group sampling features this morning. If you're unfamiliar with group sampling, it is a sampling method that allows you to score behavior on groups, right? So pretty straightforward definition there. I think it's probably easier to understand it in contrast to focal animal sampling. And so focal animal sampling is what we've had in ZooMonitor since we released the app in 2016. And that's where you're watching a single individual and just scoring behaviors on that one individual. Group sampling is a little bit different. Group sampling, you'll be scoring all of the behavior happening in the group at a single point in time, right? And so you're going to be scoring multiple animals, and really you're going to be scoring, how many animals are doing behavior A, how many animals are doing behavior B, and so forth. So that's the idea there of what group sampling is. And of course, the why of group sampling, there's really two very important use cases for group sampling. And so your first is where you have too many animals, to easily score individually. So if you have a group of maybe, let's say, 20 chimpanzees or something like that, and you're doing single focal animal observations, that's going to take you a long time to get through watching every single chimpanzee there. The other sort of situation too, which is a lot of times correlated with that context, is when you have animals you can't reliably individually identify, which, like I said, typically goes hand in hand with having a large group too. And so certainly if you have a large group of animals you can't reliably identify, that's a very ideal case for looking at group sampling as an option there. And so for us, some of the ones that we're considering, we're going to be starting projects looking at group sampling at Lincoln Park Zoo is with our naked mole rats. So that is obviously a group that meets those criteria pretty well. Our Egyptian fruit bats. So that's another case where, given the lighting issues, it can be kind of tricky to reliably identify. Certainly with flamingos, I've tried to do some focal animal sampling with flamingos before. We have about 50 flamingos at Lincoln Park, and that other groups, other institutions have much larger flocks than that. But certainly that's another ideal case. And obviously, any institutions out there that have like aquatics and looking at those sorts of groups, it would be, I think, really advantageous to consider this. And so just to start us off here, I'm going to jump in and I'm actually going to start showing you what it looks like to record behavior with the group sampling feature. And then I'm going to sort of take a step back and then show sort of how we make a group sampling project. And then I'll close out with talking about how the data from the group sampling behavior gets analyzed in ZooMonitor in the built-in reports, how that data gets handled. So let me go ahead and share my screen. There's a button to share a screen. I know I've got so many buttons down here though. There it is. It's the big one. Here we go. Move this over here. Okay. Heather, Laura, could you just give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? We're good? Okay, awesome. All right, so let me jump in and show you one of the demo projects I have here for group sampling. So we're going to be doing this project here that I set up for fruit bats. And so this is with our Egyptian fruit bats. We have a group of 8 fruit bats at the moment. I don't have any additional questions set up on this demo project, but certainly on this screen here, you could set up any additional question that you would have on any other project. Certainly there's no problem in doing that here with group sampling. And you can see, so one of the first things you'll notice that's a little bit different here is, unlike with the focal individual animals that you would set up in a project of focal subjects, where you would have a male, a female, or an unknown symbol up here, for any group you set up, you have this same icon. So all of your groups will have this icon with the 2 paws up here. That's sort of our standard icon for groups. So on this project, just before I get started, I'll just give a quick intro of what we're recording here. So you'll see an all occurrence channel where we're going to score social grooming. And then I have an interval behavior channel where we'll score some general behavior state, so a pretty basic behavior categories of things like inactive, feeding, locomotion, and so forth. And then at the bottom, we're going to score interval behavior or interval space use for the group. And so that's one that, yeah, go ahead.
We can only see your home screen on ZooMonitor. We're not able to.
Sorry, was there a question?
Oh, yeah. We're only able to see the home screen of your ZooMonitor. It's not showing any of like the project.
Ah,
sorry.
No, that's good. Can you see it now? So do you see Egyptian fruit bats at the top?
Yes. Yep, now we see it.
Okay. All right. I guess I can't move it over to my other screen. So I'm going to be looking not at the camera. Apologies. So like I was saying, so the one that you're going to notice is a little bit different than maybe the other group sampling feature. So with the main group sampling, I'm going to click a behavior and you're going to see actually a mode will come up and I'll input how many animals are doing a behavior. So you get this like little calculator almost counter and you can put in how many animals are doing a behavior. With the space use, it's a little bit different. So we talked a lot about that when we were developing this feature of, do you want to put a dot in where the center of your group is? And you could do something like that, but that could be really messy to estimate and be reliable with that. Certainly as groups, move around, where you would put that center point of the group is. And so what we've done there instead is you can plot individuals on the map. But unlike with the focal animal sampling, you plot the individuals as sort of unknown animals. And so in this project here, where we have our Egyptian fruit bat group is our animal to this project, in the export in the data, it'll say Egyptian fruit bat group 1, Egyptian fruit bat group 2, and so forth, all the way to individual 8. And so each individual in each individual fruit bat will get a location you'll see will plot on the map. So it's a little bit different because you are scoring individuals there, but you're doing it in sort of an unidentifiable way. You don't need to identify the individual. And certainly, for all those use cases I mentioned earlier, I think there's certainly a lot of advantageous situations there for plotting space use pretty quickly, as you'll see, for those groups. Okay, so let me go ahead and kick this off. All right, so you can see up here our first behavior. So let's say we're seeing some social grooming. So I can click that. We have 2 animals grooming. So this is that modifier screen I mentioned. So you can put 2 animals. Up here at the top, you see it has the group remaining. So it gives you your total group count as a guide there. And you can also input a percentage or as a count. And you'll see the screen pop up a few more times. I'm just going to plot this really quick. And you can plot the all occurrence behaviors using the map as well, just like you would with the focal sampling there for focal individuals. Okay, so it just beeped. And so we have 8 animals we're going to score. So let's say we have 5 animals inactive. So we can put 5 there as inactive. And let's say the other 3 are feeding, foraging. So we scored the behavior of the 8. You can see it grays out here and it says group remaining 0. So it gives you a nice little guide to make sure that you're not scoring too many. I set this project up to go way too quick. So I'm just going to score space use on the next interval here. So this is our second interval. Let's say this time we saw maybe 4 animals inactive, or alternatively, I could say 50%. That's going to be the same thing. So you can input it as a percent or as a count number. The one thing I will note is that if you input it as a percent, what is being stored is still the count number, right? So in your export, you're not going to get a 50% in your exported data. You're going to get 4, and you have to know that your total group size is 8, and that's 50%. So that's how it gets stored there. And one other thing to mention here too is there is this button here for max remaining, and that was kind of a nice little sort of quality of life thing in recording this. That if you have a large number of animals, let's say you have like 20 animals and you score 10 doing one behavior and 5 doing another behavior, and you can't see the other 5, you can quickly, easily just hit max remaining and it'll put all of the remaining animals you haven't scored into that behavior there. And so pretty self-explanatory, I hope, but that's what max remaining is referring to there. So let's score that 4 for inactive here. We're going to hit save. And let's say we had maybe 3 feeding foraging, and let's say 1 was performing some other solitary behavior, maybe self-directed behavior. Okay, so we scored all 8. You can see it grayed out the behavior channel there, so preventing you from scoring it. If you made a mistake, you can always click the undo button, this little icon right here, and that'll remove the most recent behavior you scored there. So that removed just the other solitary, but didn't clear out all of the other behaviors we recorded on that channel. And then this is the really exciting one for scoring space use. So you can see I put a dot on the map here for plotting one animal, right? And so if I click again on the map, it's going to just keep moving just like it would if it was a focal animal. It'll just keep moving that one dot around the map, and you only have that one dot. If you want to plot additional dots, which for a group of 8 animals, you probably would want to do, you have 2 options here. So you can either click to add single, so you can click that, and you can click that every time to plot one animal. And the reason you might want to do that is if you're trying to get really precise spots to plot on the map, if you have to adjust it and do some of those micro adjustments of like, you know, they're not quite there, they're right there on the map. If it's a difficult habitat map to put some of those locations, that's where that add single might come in handy there. The other way you can plot, and I'll just remove those really quick. The other way you can plot, which is much faster, is the add multi. So if you click that, it'll stay active. And this you can basically sort of rapid click all of your locations very quickly there. So it would be one click to plot the first animal, a second click to plot add multi, and then you can just plot them every single animal after that point, one click per animal. So you saw I plotted 8 animals right there in just a couple seconds. And just like how it worked with the general behavior channel up here, where it locked you out and told you group remaining was 0 once you've hit your max group size, it does the same thing here. So you see we can't plot any more animals. If I keep clicking the map, it just moves around that last dot there. And you can see it gives you a guide here too of how many remaining. And just like with the general behavior channel, if you click this undo, it doesn't clear all of the locations, it does it one at a time. So if you made a mistake on the last one, you can easily remove that one and replot that one. So that is the recording of the behavior. So let me now jump into admin and sort of show how we set up that project. So the key difference here is groups are a new type of animal in ZooMonitor, right? And so really you're not having to specify as you set up the project, as you'll see, a lot of additional special things for group sampling. If you add an animal to your project and you try to record data for that animal if you add a group to your project and you try to record data for that group animal, it automatically will give you that modifier screen with the little counter and all of that. So it's doing it based on who that focal subject is, if it's a group or if it's an individual. And so let me show you really quick. I'll jump into animals, and you can see that there's individuals and groups you can toggle between. And so for our demo project here, I have this Egyptian fruit bat group, and you see I have the group count 8. I can create a new one here and just sort of show you what this screen looks like. So this is where you'd create an animal. At this point, this screen is the same whether it's an individual or a group. And so you would give it a name here. So this could be Egyptian fruit bat group is what we had, but it could be your naked mole rat group or whatever group you're watching. You can add in a text description if there's anything that you need your observers to be able to see during a session, like if there's any specific identifiers or additional rules that you want to point out or anything like that. This is something that you can pull up while you're doing the session. And then you would give it a species. So you would put it into a species. And then the last part here is you would designate whether it's an individual or group. And so if you clicked individual, this is what you would have seen before. So you would select if it's a male, female, or unknown. The new option is group. And And instead of having sex, you have a max group count. And so that for the fruit bats, that was 8, but basically that's the total number of animals you have in your group. And that's used, as you saw there, to set sort of the bounds on how many animals you can plot, how many animals you can score during that. So that's sort of a catch-all. So that's how to set up a group. And then I'll show you kind of what that looks like in a project. So I'll jump into a project here. Group sampling demo fruit bats. So this is the one we just did here. And so you can see, there we go. You can see our Egyptian fruit bat group is showing up here as our animal on this project. You can add totally multiple groups. You can add a group and individual focal subjects. So you can mix and match your subject types as much as you want for a project. You don't need, for a group sampling project, it to be only a group that you're watching there. So you might have, you know, a whole group that you're watching behavior, but maybe there's one individual in the group that you're scoring some all occurrence behavior. If there's like a behavior of concern, you could have that single individual in the group pulled out and score that as like all occurrence behavior there, you know, if there was something of interest. So you can certainly add other animals here too. The habitat map. So you, let me pull this up. So this is the map that we scored the data on, just to orient, just so this makes a little bit of sense of what you're seeing here. It looks like a brown gobbledygook. This is the front of, this is the visitor viewing area here, and this is the viewing windows, these lines here. This is some gunite structures here. This is an artificial tree. So of course, the top-down view is what we're looking at. And so there's viewing into the habitat this way, and then viewing into the habitat this way. And you saw when I plotted those locations earlier, one of the places we most commonly see our fruit bats is on our lights that are in the front of our habitat. And so these are our light structures here, these 3 yellow orangey boxes there. And then we have some mesh up at the top that's on the roof to give them more places to grab onto there. And then some shift doors here, keeper doors and shift doors in the back here. And I'm just pointing all that out so when I pull up the heat map, it makes a little bit more sense where we're seeing some of the locations. And so nothing is different here on the habitat map for a group or individual. All occurrence behaviors, so nothing at all is going to be different here for a group or individual. So you would just add an all occurrence behavior just as you would if you had a project right now on a focal individual. You would just add the behavior as per normal. Continuous channels is the one sampling method we do not allow for group sampling, right? And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. It's really hard to score continuous data on an individual and multiply that by trying to know everything a group is doing at every moment. Is kind of outside the bounds of what I think most humans are capable of. So there isn't continuous channels. You know, you're not scoring duration of time of multiple behaviors for the group and then constantly updating that. So in the example you saw earlier, it was the all occurrence channel and then an interval channel. And the interval channel is the only thing that you do need to specify if it is a group or individual. And so you can see here the subject set up here is group in this project here. And so when you add a new channel, when you go to add channel, this is where you would specify if it is an individual or a group. And the reason why this rule is in there is that if it is a channel for individuals, you can only score one behavior, right? So if you're watching a single focal animal, because ethograms are meant to be mutually exclusive, you're scoring one behavior at a time. Even if they're doing multiple behaviors, you score one behavior at a time. And so ZooMonitor limits you when you watch that focal individual that you're only going to score one behavior. However, with the group, obviously you saw that's not the case. We're going to have to score some animals are inactive, some animals are feeding, some animals might be locomoting. And so making this a group is what allows that to happen. So this allows you to score those multiple behaviors for that channel. And so you can see here that group set up for the general behavior channel. And just like I said with, mixing and matching your focal subjects, you certainly can be mixing and matching your channels here too. So much to the chagrin of our developers, we allow a lot of flexibility in ZooMonitor, and this is certainly no different. So you can add individual channels, you can add multiple group channels. There really aren't any restrictions on how you set up the project there. You can set it up as per the needs for the question that you have there. And nothing is different here with additional questions or observers. This is the same as all of the other projects would have been before. And so this is really that key difference. So let me jump in really quick and show you what some of the analysis looks like with the built-in reports with that data. And then once I wrap up that, we can take some questions if you have any. So let's go to our reporting section here. So I'm going to pull up our group sampling demo for fruit bats. So you can select the channel type. So let's first look at, maybe we'll just tick through each of them. We can look at all occurrence. Let's first look at, let's say, a heat map, right? So we were scoring that for the social grooming behavior that we had, so where social grooming is occurring. If you had multiple behaviors, all occurrence behaviors you were scoring, you could filter that out here and make sure that you're just looking at the heat map for just social grooming, or if you had another one like, antagonistic behavior or something like that, you could filter that out, look at any of those behaviors separately with the heat map. But since we just have the one here, our heat map will just be for social grooming. I can run that here, and you can see pretty easily, we are seeing social grooming most commonly happening around this tree. This is also, where we put some of their feeding bowls hang around here too. So certainly some grooming happening around there, and a little bit on the lights over here, and some happening back here. And so the heat map gets plotted, each coordinate that you were putting on the pop-up window there for the all occurrence behaviors, the dots that you're seeing here. These are not the dots that we plotted at the bottom of the screen when we were scoring it for the interval behavior. That's a heat map I'll bring up in a second. And then the other thing that we looked at here is our, we could look at a behavior budget or a target behavior report. So for the behavior budget, if we run that, you can see that the average rate or occurrences per minute was 2.25. If you hover over it, you'll see that pop up there. So you can see the rate of the behavior occurring there. And so the way the all occurrence gets calculated here, let me pull this up so I don't misspeak, since I want to make sure I get this right. So this is looking at the rate of group occurrences. And so it's taking the total number of occurrences of the behavior during a session and dividing by the duration of the session in minutes, which is giving you that occurrences per minute, that group occurrences per minute. One thing to note is that you're scoring, when you score the all occurrence behavior social grooming, you're scoring how many animals are doing the behavior, right? On that first pop-up screen where you had the little calculator thing, and then you score the math as the two pop-ups. This calculation is not incorporating how many animals are doing the behavior. And so we that was definitely something we discussed quite a bit in how we set this up. And ultimately we erred on the side of calculating as this group occurrences per minute, which is basically the same exact way it gets calculated right now for individual animals in a project. And so we erred on the side of calculating it like that to keep that consistency with how all occurrences are calculated for individuals. You certainly can factor that in if you export the data. The data is available in the export of how many animals were doing the behavior if you did want to look at that. So you could look at the rate of animal occurrences, something like that, taking like the total animals engaged in a behavior over the entire session and dividing by the time in minutes. So that would be a little bit different. So instead of like in the case that in the example I did earlier, we recorded one occurrence of social grooming, right? But we recorded two animals doing it. So this calculation is saying one occurrence happened in 1 minute of time, right? You could alternatively say 2 animals did the behavior in that 1 minute of time. And if you scored it, 2 or 3 times, you could have had like 10 animals were social grooming during the session. So that's an alternative way to calculate it based on how many animals are doing the behavior, which, like I said, is not what this is, but certainly you could do manually. And if anyone has any trouble there, any questions about those two, definitely always feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help with that. And then the target behavior, it's pretty straightforward. So this is the data that goes into making the average that you just saw in that column chart there. So the first session I had recorded here, we saw two occurrences during that session. So these sessions were 1 minute in time, so easy to translate there for us. The next session I recorded, we saw it happen once during that session, and then 3 times, twice, and once. So you can kind of track this over time to look at how much, what the rate of a behavior is. I will say if you had multiple all occurrence behaviors, this is definitely the chart that you want to filter your behaviors for. Because if you try to throw, 4 or 5 or 6 all occurrence behaviors on this chart, I call it the spaghetti chart. Then it looks like a bowl of pasta was poured over your graph, and you just have a ton of lines and can't really make much sense out of it. So that's probably where you'll want to filter for a single behavior and just look at those behaviors separately. Interval here. So we can start off with the heat map. So this is the stuff we were plotting at the bottom of the screen there. So you can see a lot of the areas that we've seen them is on our light structures here and here. I will just give a quick disclaimer. This is all fake data that I recorded for our demo project. So this is not actually real data. However, I will say that that is definitely one of the areas our fruit bats do use most commonly. So it is reflective of some of those patterns, but not quite as maybe stark as this is showing here. And so you can see kind of where they're at. Like I said earlier, with filtering for behaviors, that's really a nice thing here with the interval heat map. We could look at, like, let's say, where do we want to see them feeding, foraging, drinking? Do we see any patterns there? Can see them in sort of some of the same spots there. So you can filter for some of those behaviors. Let me make sure that this is, yeah, it is working. So you can see this is with our other solitary, where we've seen other solitary behavior. So you can see it filters for just those locations when that behavior was scored there. And the last one to bring up here before I close out is our behavior budget, our target behavior, how that data gets calculated there. So let's go ahead and show that. So it'll show you sort of what would be an activity budget, I guess, more or less for the group. So it is the average percent of scans per session. So you can see it. The most common behavior we saw here was inactive. That was about 60% of the scans there. Feeding, foraging was next highest at 18, about 19% there. And so the way this data gets calculated, so this is the percent of the group. So this is the percent of the animals engaged in a behavior out of the total animals recorded per interval. So what that's saying is, for that example where we recorded four bats doing a behavior out of 8, it's going to say 50% of the group was performing that behavior. Let's say that was inactive. 50% of the group was inactive, right? And so it's using that 50% for that interval, that scan there. And it's taking the average across all of your scans for your session. And then it's averaging that across your multiple sessions in this, when you pull up this report. So this is, we have 8 sessions here in this report. So it's averaging that across those 8 separate observations we did there. Yeah, and so that's how that's calculated. And then I can pull up the target behavior here. And you can see this is looking at those percentages that I just mentioned that it was calculating on a per session basis for each session separately. So you can see for the first session, we saw 100% of the bats were inactive. Second session, 100% of the bats were inactive. And then the sessions recorded today showed a little bit more variability in the behaviors and some different behaviors there. So this would just be the same as you would have for the individual individual data for individual animals, and you score that and look at target behavior. Okay, I think with that, I'll stop screen sharing and just see if anyone has any questions about this. And you don't have to have any questions, but if you do, I'm definitely happy to help. No, okay. I think I had a comment in the chat. Thank you. I think this method is useful. Applied to monitor macaques. Yeah, macaques are definitely going to be a group that I could see this making a lot of sense for sure. Okay. If you had any other ZooMonitor questions, I'm also happy to help with that. But if not, we can always wrap up a little bit early here.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to check out upcoming live events, such as demos or our office hours, check out our events page on our support site. You can see our upcoming schedule there. Hope to see you in our next event.